Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Test Creation, Management, and Execution, the Complete Experience. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. You should see your GoToWebinar control panel in the upper right corner of your screen. If you have joined the presentation using your computer speaker system by default, and you would prefer to join over the telephone, just select phone call in the audio pane, and the dial-in information will be displayed. If you have selected mic and speakers and you're having difficulty hearing me, please toggle the telephone option in your control panel and dial in. If you're experiencing any issues, please type the details in the questions section of your control panel. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the question pane of the control panel. You may send your questions in at any time, and we will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you'll receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view the recording. I would now like to pass the mic over to Alyssa Leiden, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Sauce Labs, who will be introducing the webinar.
Hi, everyone, and again, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Alyssa. I work in the marketing department at Sauce Labs, and we're really excited to bring you this joint session with our friends from TestProject as we present our joint solution to help make end-to-end test automation creation and execution easier than ever before. As mentioned earlier, the session is being recorded. We will send it out to everyone within 24 to 48 hours. I also want to take the time to thank everyone who pre-submitted questions before this webinar. We'll definitely get to some of those. I have them pulled up, but if any other questions pop up during the presentation, please feel free to ask through the questions pane in your control panel. But without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenters for today's session. First is Kevin Dunne. He's the General Manager of TestProject. He has a deep interest in the emerging trends in software development and testing and is dedicated to collaborating with thought leaders in the space. He's one of the first employees at Tricentis. So Kevin has seen many facets of the business, working in sales, customer support, marketing, and product management. And I can also attest he's a great guy. Kristian Meier is the Technical Director of Business Development at Sauce Labs. He's been in the software development industry for 20 years, spending the past 5 years at Sauce Labs in a technical pre-sales role. He has helped Sauce Labs' largest clients and partners achieve success in DevOps and continuous testing. And we've known each other for a while, so I can also attest that you're in for some great information from both Kristian and Kevin. And so with that, I'll let you two take it away.
Great. Thank you, Alyssa. Really excited to be here. This is Kevin, and I'll be starting off the presentation for today, covering off on some of the aspects, specifically around the test creation and management pieces that we can accomplish with TestProject. And then I'll be turning it over to Kristian a little bit later to talk about a lot of the execution and analysis pieces that will be covered off on by Sauce Labs in this joint solution that we're presenting today. So let me get the slides going here. So on this first slide here, I wanted to introduce the topic just by talking really about one of the main themes that we're going to be covering off on with this joint solution. That is open source, and specifically open source test automation. So I think most of the people on the call today are probably familiar with open source, its popularity, and just the trends around how much it's grown over the course of the past few years. We can see that this is proven out and supported by the interest from the investment community. Obviously, money talks, and if you look at the open source ecosystem in general, over the course of the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years, there's been a huge spike, both in the number of open source products in related products, as well as the size of the investments being made into these companies. So there's really a lot of support in the overall technology market for solutions built around open source. And as you'll see when we progress into the demo, this presentation is going to be covering off on a solution that is focused specifically around open source test automation using both TestProject and Sauce Labs. As we talk about the market, it's great if you're a tester or you're a developer or you're somebody who's doing automated testing. It's great to know that there are many different solutions, different open source projects out on the market. I think a lot of this is because the developers really don't like to do testing. So they're very happy to contribute to and help build out tools that help to do automated testing against the apps that they're building and they're responsible for maintaining the quality of. So you probably know about projects like Selenium and Appium, which we'll be covering off on today. Selenium being probably the most popular project for automating against web applications, Appium being very popular for mobile applications. There's also been an emergence of different tools for doing behavior-driven development, so open source frameworks like Cucumber, as well as SpecFlow, which has recently become part of the Tricentis portfolio alongside TestProject, and then also other tools that sort of cover off on more niche parts of the application ecosystem. So you have SOAP UI covering off on API testing, as well as tools like Cypress, for example, that cover off on more JavaScript development. But these are just a few of the many tools out on the market. But we see that in general, all of these tools lack several things when it comes to serving the needs of testers specifically. Most often, these tools have really been built by more of a developer or a technical persona and don't necessarily cater to the needs of your average tester that we work with at both TestProject and Sauce Labs. We see that when you take these open source tools and you try to bring them to teams who have either never done any test automation before, or they maybe were using commercial tools that were more well supported and had more options for people who weren't necessarily that developer or highly technical persona, you get these 5 common problems, which we've seen in working with thousands of companies that are implementing tools like Selenium and Appium. I think the number one problem, which we'll cover off on in depth today, we'll show you how TestProject can help to solve this, is that most teams lack the basic development skills that are required to create tests in these tools. They require coding and scripting in languages that oftentimes testers are not familiar with. That can become a bottleneck as you get into trying to find members on your team who can create tests in these tools. Second thing we see is that these tools don't really have built-in a framework component or a sort of repository that helps you to minimize the impact of maintenance. When things inevitably break with these automated tests, you end up chasing 20 or 30 different places, for example, where you might have used the same element locator. And a lot of these tools, they don't put in place the best practices around reducing that maintenance and turnaround time when fixing tests. So that's definitely something that we'll be covering off on today. Then we'll also be talking about how teams don't really do a great job of sharing information across their teams in terms of what's been automated, what hasn't been automated. A lot of teams do a lot of duplicative work and don't do a good job sort of reusing assets that are out there and existing. And then Kristian will be covering off on 2 specific problems related to execution. One being that test automation suites often take a very long time to execute, and the other being that people don't often have visibility into what specifically has passed and failed when it comes to their executions. So I will click here. Okay, so getting into the first topic today, I would love to know a bit more from the audience. Maybe you can send in some questions and chats about whether you're more of a tester or more of a developer. But we see that oftentimes most people who are focusing on writing these automated tests are really more of a tester persona rather than a technical developer. We see that the stats show us that about 72% of people who are working on automated tests are really more of kind of your tester persona. Really, it's only more of about 28% of people working on automated tests are more of a developer. So the skill set is typically coming from a background more of sort of manual test execution rather than writing code in frameworks like a .NET or a Java, where a software engineer would typically be focused. And we see that this radiates out into becoming a problem as far as the skill set, where people are lacking those technical skills needed to build automation. We're seeing that 34% of companies are lacking the technical skills, and the 32% of those companies are claiming that they're spending too much time trying to sort of train up their staff, train up these manual testers on how to do these more technical skills required by these automated testing tools. And so where we come in with TestProject and help to support this gap is with what you see here, which is our recorder. This is a scriptless test recorder. I know that this animation here is moving rather quickly, but what it's showing is that we can build an automated test, which is a repeatable automated test, using simply clicking and typing with the screen. You see here there's no code that needs to be written. There's no IDE that a tester needs to go and enter to be able to create these tests. They simply interact with the application. They can create steps. They can create validations even to make sure that certain things are displayed on the screen. And best of all, they don't need to write any code. And as you'll see later on in the presentation, all of these tests are going to be exported into native Selenium and Appium, so they can run not only locally on your own machines, but they're also fully compatible with cloud environments like Sauce Labs. So we think that with this joint solution here, you're going to find that we're solving a lot of the skill set gap problems that are present in today's testing teams. Now, second thing that we see teams struggling with quite often would be maintenance. So here you can see that we have an animation of a game called Whack-A-Mole. This is where you continuously have one of these moles pop up through the holes here, and you're trying to hit them, make them go away. We see that that is commonly what a tester's work will look like. They're never really able to go and write new tests. They're always sort of chasing their tests that they built previously, trying to fix issues when it comes to things like broken locators and just general flakiness of their automated tests. A lot of the reason for this is not the tester's fault. Actually, it falls on the developer. The developer will maybe have made a change, not really thinking about the impact to the tester. That change will break some sort of elements or locator, some way of figuring out where the button or the drop down or whatever it is that the tester wants to interact with is on the screen. And so when that happens and when those locators break, inevitably we need to make changes to update those. The issue is most of these tools like Selenium and Appium, they don't come out of the box with something like a page object model. A page object model essentially is something that allows all of your tests to reuse the same page objects essentially across each of the tests. So if you're consistently hitting your main page and you have a header object, for example, rather than having that defined in each individual test case, it would be better to have this page object model, which sort of creates a variable for that particular locator and shares it across all of your tests. The benefit of this is when that inevitably changes, it breaks, you need to add a new one because some new functionality is there. Rather than having to go into each particular test, find the step that uses that locator and update it, what's going to happen instead is you're going to be able to go into the page object model, specifically update that single reference, and it should update all of the other test cases that use it. So here you'll see that in TestProject, we've actually built out a page object model for you, and it's updated and populated automatically. So when you go into the elements section of TestProject, you'll see every listed element here, and you'll be able to go in and add new elements, delete deprecated elements. You can even update existing elements. So should something change, you know, the XPath is different, the ID is different, simply come into this elements section here, update the reference, and then we'll be good to go. All of your tests should be updated, no needing to hunt around and try to find in every different test where that particular locator was used. Now, the third thing here that I'm going to cover off on before handing over to Kristian is that we see a lot of customers falling into the trap of not doing a good job sharing information across teams. So you might have one team that has its test around testing a successful login, and maybe another team has a test around testing an unsuccessful login. We're spending time creating these tests as well as maintaining these tests, which at the end of the day are doing essentially the same thing. Outside the last step, it might be slightly different in terms of what's validated, and the data being used might be different. In one case, we might have a data set that is related to actual existing users, where in the second case, it might be testing with users that shouldn't or can't exist. When we talk about how TestProject can help with this, one of the great features which we like to tell customers about is the fact that you can actually nest test cases within one another. So you can see here, for example, in this particular test case we're executing, there's actually a second step, which is not just a step, it's an entire test case, which is being referenced here, which performs the entire login scenario. You can see that you can change the usernames and passwords that are fed into that test case, so you could have it perform both a successful as well as an unsuccessful login type of procedure. And the benefit of this is that should that change, for example, you change the way that users log in, or you change the environment that you're testing, so you need to update the URL in the test case, rather than having to go and change all those steps everywhere, and also rather than having to rewrite those steps over and over again, you just simply embed this single test case, and this test case will execute those steps every time that it's called within other tests. So these are kind of the three major wins we think that teams will find when using TestProject. Would love to turn it over now to Kristian to explain a little bit more about Sauce Labs, which is the second half of this joint solution that we're presenting today, and how Sauce Labs can help with many of the execution-related challenges that we outlined in the beginning of the presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. That was awesome. So what I'm really excited about is, like Alyssa said, I've been with Sauce for just about 5 years now, and we've become kind of the de facto place for companies to run their Selenium, Appium, Espresso, XCUI tests on our infrastructure. And Kevin, would you click the slide a couple more times? I think 2 more. Yeah, keep going. So the idea behind Sauce is we have 900 different OS and browser combinations. We have emulators, simulators. We have real devices that you can all run your manual and automated tests on. What the piece that I think that we're missing, and what I'm very excited about this partnership with TestProject, is for people who aren't aesthets to be able to run their to create these tests and run them on the Sauce Labs infrastructure. So we run close to 3 million tests a day on our infrastructure. Companies, large organizations can run at scale. That's part of our value. We have clients say that they have 1,000 tests. They're mandated to run their entire test suite on every pull request in under 4 minutes. And there's no way that they can do that to maintain that type of infrastructure, but they can just point their tests over to our grid and run them at scale. So you can see here, this is kind of how Sauce Labs works. What's great about TestProject is, as Kevin mentioned, they generate Selenium and Appium scripts, where all you do is just point over to using remote WebDriver to the Sauce Labs cloud. So we also have the ability up there on the top to get to your dev and QA sites behind your firewall. So if they're not exposed publicly, we can use this tool called Sauce Connect, and you can run back to grab your test. Next slide, please. So here, part of Sauce's value is the fact that you can run your tests in parallel. And the reason why that's important is you used to write your tests, go through your scripts, run them sequentially. And in this case, we're saying if each test takes a minute and you run them in serial, the entire test suite will take 9 minutes. The reality is The old school way of testing used to take 6, 8, 12 hours. You would start your scripts and just basically pray that the test wouldn't fail, the scripts would run, and you could get the results back the next day. With Sauce, what you can do is you can parallelize your tests, run them all at the same time, and your entire test suite will take as long as your longest test. So in this case, we're saying our longest test is 1 minute. We parallelize them. We get instant developer feedback, which is what people want, because that allows them to run or write quality code faster. Next slide, please. Part of what we provide is visibility across the organization. What Kevin mentioned before is one of the pain points of being in testing. So here we provide a dashboard, essentially, of what's passing, what's failing, what's erroring. And what this essentially allows you to do is take your tests and maintain them faster. Allows you to focus on the tests that provide no value, that aren't really catching any bugs, or they're just failing and causing problems here. So here we're saying in the orange, those are the tests that are erroring. I know I can go and focus on that. And with the TestProject tool, as you saw earlier, it makes it real easy to go in there and switch, locators, find different elements if the developers have changed the names, the tags, etc. Next. Again, here, another view of the dashboard, which basically gives you, in-depth look very quickly of, identifying the platforms with the highest failures. So maybe everything's working on Chrome, but it may not be working on Safari. We've had, large retail clients that, for whatever reason, they weren't testing on Safari. So, Macy's, for example, if I'm going in and I'm looking to buy some clothes and I go to the checkout and the checkout fails, I don't trust that website. I'm not going to buy, clothes through there. I'll either go through Amazon, Walmart, or I'll go to Nordstrom's, but I know I'm not going to use that, because most people don't think about, oh, if I just switch to Chrome or Firefox or IE, it'll work. What they'll do is they say, I don't trust this site, and move on. And they actually, from testing on Safari, realized $1 million more a month in revenue, which is, obviously that's significant. But again, they weren't testing on certain OS and browser combinations, and they were losing out. So again, this is what Sauce is really good at, is identifying those platforms with the highest failures, which teams here have the slowest tests and builds, and you can see who's using Sauce from our dashboard. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, same kind of thing. We're going to help you identify flaky and poor tests to improve reliability. I think this is another view into our dashboard. We have great analytics tools. I'm not only here to identify poor and flaky tests, but also for performance of the application. You can look into the HAR file right there in the dashboard, see what API calls are failing. Maybe you're getting a 404, 503, whatever the error message is, and it helps you quickly identify what has failed in your script, your tests, in the application itself. Again, the whole idea about this is we're gonna, whether you're a large organization that can write Selenium and Appium scripts, but you need help maintaining these tests, because a lot of the times the test suites get in the thousands of tests, and you may not need all of those. We're here to help you identify which ones you need, which ones work, and ultimately speed up that entire testing time, which will again help you create quality code faster. Next slide, please. And now here's kind of the demo of the solution at work.
Great. Yeah, so I'm sure you guys are excited to see this. Shout out to Marat on our team who helped with creating this great overview video of the solution. Let's see. Hopefully this works. It was working before. Oh,
There we go.
sorry about that. Well, that was the old slide here. I think we're giving this another shot here, see if this works. There we go. So, all right. So we're going to start out here. First things first, we need to create an account in TestProject. So we've gone out to testproject.io, created an account. It's completely free. You'll get an email from us, and you can confirm your email address, log into the platform, and you should get to see this interface here. Now, everyone in TestProject, because the accounts are free, there's no reason not to invite your teammates. That way your teammates can see all of the tests that you've created, kind of share an account, share all of the great automation that you guys are doing together. So we're inviting some other accounts, getting them to join. And within that account, we want to create a project for this demo. Projects help us to kind of separate out the work, and then we can get to recording a test here. So this is pretty quick. I know this is going fast, but we're recording first a test against a web application. So same web app we were showing earlier, we're going to test a sign up here. So we're going to go in with the recorder. We're going to create this test. This test is basically saying what country we're from, adding in our address here. We're also going to provide an email and a phone number for this particular test scenario. And then you'll see at the end here, we're going to actually add a validation. So we can go in and make sure that we see this saved message appear on the screen. We're going to make sure that that's visible. So this is a very simple test. It gives you an idea of sort of what we can capture. And once that's complete, we're going to save off this test and we're going to run it back. So now TestProject is executing this back in the browser using Selenium to make sure that the test does exactly what we want it to do. And it looks like it has done that. So we've completed our web test. The great thing about Sauce Labs is that Sauce Labs covers not only browsers, but also mobile devices. So we're going to also record a test on Android against an Android application that we've built. This would work the same for iOS as well. So it works on Apple devices too. And we'll start up the recorder. And you'll see that the recorder is now looking at an Android device that's connected to our laptop, which we're doing this testing from. So we're looking into that Android device, we're opening the app, we're performing the same type of scenario where we're basically creating a user here, going in, saying the location, providing their address, also providing information about their email and phone number. So this will work on this. In this case, this is an Android native application that we've built, but this would also work for any mobile web scenarios that you want to test as well. We can do the same type of validation, and then we'll save off the test. And then when we click to run it here, right now we're just running it back against the local Android device. We'll execute it on Sauce Labs in a few minutes here. This now is showing you the add-ons library. So a lot of the reason people need to write code or need to have that sort of scripting type of test cases to do customized actions to get around that and allow you to stay scriptless. If you want to do that, we've built this add-ons library. You'll see there's hundreds of add-ons here from our team as well as from the community that you can use. And then also you'll see here our elements library. So we were talking earlier about the page object model. That's what this element library allows for. It gives you an element library both for your web and your mobile apps, so you can manage all of those locators centrally. And then finally here you see management of our devices. So in this case, this is our physical devices that we own. It's showing the laptops that they're connected to as well as the mobile devices themselves if we're using those that are connected to those machines. So we'll show you first, this is a basic use case of using TestProject on its own, just going in and executing this test locally. So in this case, we're only taking advantage of the browsers that are on the laptops that we currently own or the mobile devices which are connected to the laptops that we currently own. So only physical devices, and so we're sort of limited in what we can test. But we're going to change that. We're actually going out to Sauce Labs and we're creating a Sauce Labs account. So if you don't have one of those, you can do that, get a free trial, and you will similarly get an email from them, and you can go in and verify your account. Once you do that, you should be able to log in rather easily, and you'll be brought into the Sauce Labs interface. And the reason we need to log in here for the integration is we need to go into the user settings area, and we need to get this specific access key here. That's going to be used over in TestProject. Basically, along with the username and that access key, we're going to be able to connect the accounts. And you see, once they're connected, now rather than just being limited to the browsers and devices I own, I can see any browsers and devices in Sauce Labs that are available through my account. So I can search for Android devices, different types of browsers on different operating systems, iOS devices, emulators, you name it, and we can run the tests, same as we just ran them locally. They're going to get executed out in Sauce Labs Cloud. We'll have a real-time view of what's going on there, so you can see the test as it's executing. It's updating here live in the Sauce Labs interface, so we can watch the test, make sure that it's doing what we think it should be doing, that it's not getting stuck on any particular step, etc. So all of that information is still available to us, even though we don't own the physical device that it's getting executed on. And then it will save all of this information as well. So it's great. And if you want to go back later, watch the video of what happened, we'll be able to do that for web tests as well as mobile tests here. So you can see for our mobile tests, we can get a live view into what's going on the Sauce Labs side. We can watch the test execute. We can see which of kind of the system utilities are being used by the test, what other types of errors might have been happening, and watch this video in real time as well.
Yeah, this is
so now both. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Kevin. I was going to say, and if you already have an existing Sauce Labs account, you just enter in your username and your API key. And what Kevin was talking about was those test assets, the screenshots, the videos, the log files is what we provide.
Yep. And then those will be linked to TestProject. So if you're going into a TestProject report and you're drilling down and you're curious to get to those assets Kristian mentioned, you'll see there in the very end, there was a link to the Sauce Labs report. So you can easily get from TestProject into Sauce Labs and vice versa. So great kind of connection at the analytics level there as well. So that was what we wanted to cover off on today. We're very excited about this new integration and hope you guys are too. We'd love to have you guys sign up for accounts both of TestProject and Sauce Labs if you don't have them already. If you do, then we'd welcome you to try out this integration. We've got it live and we're ready for people to give it a test spin. So we hope that you can give it a shot and give us your feedback on how it works for you. And at this time, I think we're going to hand it back over to Alyssa to get to some of the questions that I'm sure you guys have about what this integration can offer.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin and Kristian, for a great presentation. As someone who's been in this industry for over 5 years, and I've talked to hundreds of customers at this point, and I know that test creation and execution, being able to tame that beast together is a big pain point. So it's exciting to see some solutions come through that are going to be really valuable for anyone who's trying to build out test automation and execute at scale. The first question that I wanted to tee up is one of the pre-submitted questions from Justin Smith. Are there any benefits to using this software for anyone who has coding experience? And I think that's more directed towards you, Kevin, with TestProject.
Yes, so that's a great question. We didn't get to show that in the video, but TestProject does have an SDK. So that SDK is essentially similar to Selenium or Appium, a coded approach to creating tests. The reasons why you'd want to use that over using Selenium or Appium on its own is one, that it would provide sort of a single interface to Selenium and Appium, so you don't have to learn both of those separate sets of actions and syntaxes and whatnot. And the second reason is then you can use all of the other features within TestProject. So if you don't want to use the recorder because you want to actually script your test, you can go ahead and use our SDK, which is compatible as well. So you can include that SDK in any existing Selenium and Appium tests you have. And then once the tests are leveraging the SDK, you can use the element repository. You can use our parameterization for doing data-driven testing. You can use the agent management. You can obviously use our integration to Sauce Labs. You can get any of the analytics, do the permissions as well, and user management in our platform. So there'd still be a lot of benefits, even if you don't want to take sort of the scriptless approach that TestProject Recorder offers. You should definitely check out our SDK and see if that would be valuable to you if you're taking more of a scripted approach, but want some of the TestProject framework benefits around that.
Yeah, and if you're in charge of not only writing the application as well as the test, this makes it really easy to write the tests and also maintain them, which ultimately allows you to get back to your main focus, which is create the application.
Awesome. Thanks. I think that's a great answer. Another pre-submitted question from Akash. This one, probably for both of you guys. It's all about the execution piece. So how do you execute TestProject tests in parallel on the Sauce Labs solution across like different devices, different browsers and operating systems? Kristian, can you walk us through that, how that works?
Yeah, sure. So if you, I know the video went a little fast, but if you saw it, they chose to run the same test across an Android emulator as well as a Chrome on a desktop. And if you notice, there was, it said 2 of 2 tests running in parallel. So the nice thing is about the test project is it's very point and click. You can add as many devices as you want, as many OS and browser combinations as you want to test on. And then ultimately on the Sauce side is you can infinitely scale to however many tests you want to run in parallel. And as mentioned before, we have clients that run 1,000 tests in parallel, 500 tests in parallel, 10 tests. It just all depends on how fast you want to get your tests done.
Great. Awesome. Let's see, going to some of the questions that are asked during the session. Derek would like to know if you can manually edit the raw Selenium recorded script in TestProject. And if you do edit, is there a chance that it will break the replay?
Yeah, so that's a great question. As of right now, we do allow for that. Essentially, there's a button that allows you to take any test and you would export that into Selenium. So it would really be TestProject SDK, but it's essentially a Selenium or Appium test. So you can export those. Once they're exported, we actually sort of switch them over to the coded approach. So you wouldn't be exporting a test and importing it back into sort of a replay script. It would be exported into code, and once it's in code, we sort of treat it as a coded test going forward. So you do need to take some consideration into that. If you export a test and you want to keep it scriptless, the better approach would actually be to create an add-on. It would be better, rather than exporting the test into a full coded script, it would be better to actually create an add-on using our SDK. These add-ons let you do scripted functionality and essentially let you write code that can be run within steps while the script remains a scriptless test and can be replayed, can be recorded on top of, can be edited within TestProject's UI. So if that's the goal that you're going after, I would suggest writing an add-on. While there is the capability to export to code, it's sort of a final a final action that once you export it into code, it's going to live as code from that point forward, so it won't be compatible with the recorder anymore.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's a really important call out there, especially when you consider some of I remember back in the day when there was the Selenium builder, the record and playback, and how it was great in the beginning and then it produced a lot of flaky tests. It's good to have a strategy for how you want to treat these sorts of tests that you create in record and playback tools like TestProject. Let's see. How about Divya asking the question around C# Selenium tests with Sauce Labs? Kristian, tell us a little bit more about the capabilities there. Is it possible?
Yeah, sure. So anything that Selenium, Appium, Espresso XUI supports can be run on Sauce Labs. We have a great Git repo that you can go and view with Sauce Labs sample frameworks that you can see examples of C# running on Sauce. Yeah, it's all possible.
Yeah, definitely. My line is if Selenium, if it's in Selenium can do it, then Sauce Labs can do it. How about integrating with CI/CD? Arvind wants to know, how do you integrate CI/CD to test projects?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a couple different ways you can do that. Most common one is we offer out-of-the-box integrations. So for tools like, let's say, Jenkins, there'd be a plugin that you can install, and that would get installed in your Jenkins server. And then when you're creating a Jenkins build, there'd be the opportunity to use this plugin to add a post-build action, which basically just calls TestProject to run a particular job. So it would call out to TestProject and say, TestProject, I want you to run this job. And that job is basically a set of tests, as well as information about where you want those tests to be run. So those could be run locally. They could also be run in Sauce Labs. So you could easily set up a chain that would basically go from your CI/CD tool to calling TestProject to run a particular job. And then if TestProject is integrated with Sauce Labs, that job can be executed on any of the Sauce Labs browsers or devices. And then you could choose to get that report in a number of different places. You could look at the TestProject execution report. There'd be the Sauce Labs execution report, and you could likely view the report in your CI/CD tool like Jenkins as well. So a lot of different ways that you could do that, but it's certainly a very common use case that we have a number of customers doing. And the integration is very simple. It's about a 10-15 minute setup probably to get TestProject and your CI/CD tool integrated. And then you would just use the same integration that we just showed between TestProject and Sauce Labs if you want to execute the test there.
Cool. Sounds pretty straightforward. Okay, I think we have time for, let's call it 2 more questions. One from Shannon. Can you use the output of a test as input for another test with Sauce Labs?
So I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but so the idea there is a output of one test for the input of the other test on Sauce Labs. So you can download the Selenium scripts from Appium scripts from TestProject and then run them outside of the tool. But as Kevin mentioned, we wouldn't recommend that necessarily. But yes, you can. If a test requires you to set up an environment in a certain way, you can absolutely do that using Sauce Labs and TestProject. However, for best practices, your test should be, small, autonomous tests, meaning, when you go into a site and you have a login functionality, you should test the login functionality separately from maybe if it's a retail application where you want to do login, sign into your account, then put items into your checkout cart or whatever it is. If the login function doesn't work, that should not stop your tests of testing the cart functionality or the checkout feature et cetera. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a good overview. Okay, and then the last question here is one that has been popping up a lot here in the questions pane. It was a big pre-submitted question is, how much does this cost? Is there a cost to use TestProject in integration with Sauce Labs? Kevin.
Yep. So TestProject is completely free. So we really mean that. So we would love to have everyone sign up and create their account. It's part of Tricentis. So we're sort of offering this up to the community as a thank you for all of the great fans and supporters that we've had over the years. So no cost to create a TestProject account or use TestProject. The integration from TestProject to Sauce Labs is included within TestProject, so no cost for that. And there is a free trial of Sauce Labs, so if you don't have Sauce Labs either, you can get that solution to start for free, and then just any of the typical packages that you could purchase after those trial credits run out for Sauce Labs will work with TestProject, so no like additional cost above and beyond a normal Sauce Labs subscription to use this combined solution. So we definitely think everyone should check it out and give it a spin and make use of this great free software that we're offering.
Yep, you heard it here right, folks. It is completely free and open source. So great. So that's all the time we have for today. One more question I see here, though, before we go is, what is the official website of Sauce Labs? I can answer that one. It is saucelabs.com. TestProject is at testproject.io. As I mentioned, we have recorded this session. We will be sending it out within 24 to 48 hours. There will also be a survey at the end asking if you found this survey helpful, if you found this webinar helpful. Please take the time to click through and let us know what you thought. Otherwise, again, I want to thank Kevin and Kristian for their time today, and for all of you for spending some time with us. Thanks again, everyone, and happy testing.